I let my brother access my bank account for years. The day he drained it to zero was the day he unknowingly committed a federal felony. The message arrived at 6:14 a.m., sharp and cold, like a verdict. You owe me for carrying you all these years. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. Just entitlement, compressed into one sentence. I was still half asleep when I opened my banking app. I remember thinking the screen hadn't loaded correctly. I refreshed it once. Then again. The number didn't change. $0. 00. Just minutes earlier, the balance had been $185,000. Gone. Not misplaced. Not pending. Transferred. My breath locked in my chest as I opened the transaction log. The time stamp mocked me, seconds ago. The device ID was unmistakable. Caleb's phone. The same person who had spent years reminding me how fortunate I was. The same person who said I had escaped responsibility by building a life 3 hours away. The same person who believed my success existed to compensate for his choices. That money wasn't optional. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't excess. It was medical settlement money, every cent reserved for Mara, the 10-year-old who slept down the hall with a leg that never healed the way it should have. Without that surgery, pain would follow her into adulthood like a shadow. And now, someone who claimed moral credit for enduring the family had decided he deserved it more. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something colder replaced those instincts. For the first time, I didn't feel like the accommodating relative. I felt like a professional staring at evidence. Before I explain how a quiet household turned into a legal battlefield, pause for a moment and ask yourself this. How often does cruelty wear the mask of obligation? People later asked the same question the bank investigators did. Why would someone trained to detect financial manipulation ever give another person access to her account? It sounds foolish, until you understand how emotional pressure works. Exploitation doesn't begin with theft. It begins with a narrative. For over a decade, the story was simple. I left. Caleb stayed. I was framed as the one who chose ambition. He was celebrated as the one who remained loyal, occupying the shared childhood house without paying rent, supposedly overseeing the well-being of someone older who insisted on being dependent. That framing did its job. It taught me that achievement was betrayal. That distance was abandonment. And that the only way to stay forgiven was to pay for proximity. I didn't authorize his access because I was unaware. I did it because I was exhausted from defending my right to exist independently. The memory is painfully clear. 4 years ago. A hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. My legs immobilized after an accident that crushed bone and confidence in equal measure. I was terrified, not of the pain, but of losing my career. Caleb stood at the end of the bed, arms crossed. He didn't ask how I felt. He complained that his vehicle had broken down and that transporting the older relative to appointments was too much for one person. You have the high-level job, he said. I have the burden. So I added him as an authorized user. Only for emergencies, I told myself. Only for necessities. It felt like purchasing silence. What I didn't know then was this. You cannot buy peace from someone who benefits from your guilt. Over time, the word emergency lost all meaning. An emergency became weekend charges at places I'd never visited. An emergency became entertainment subscriptions I didn't use. An emergency became a vehicle lease that exceeded my first annual salary. I saw everything. And I said nothing. I drove an aging sedan with warning lights permanently glowing while he arrived at family gatherings in a luxury truck I indirectly financed. I rented a small place with unreliable plumbing to preserve funds for Mara's treatment, while quietly covering deposits he couldn't qualify for. I told myself I was being responsible. That I was stabilizing someone who had it harder. But staring at that empty balance, the illusion collapsed. I wasn't supporting him. I was paying admission into conditional acceptance. And when he emptied the account, he didn't feel like he was stealing. He felt like he was collecting. Because in his mind, the money was never mine. It was compensation. And he had just cancelled the only reason I had left to stay quiet. I closed the banking app slowly, as if moving too fast might make the damage permanent. Then I opened my work laptop. The version of me that had spent years smoothing conflicts, absorbing blame, and translating disrespect into family dynamics, went quiet. In her place stood the professional who made a living untangling financial lies for institutions that couldn't afford sentiment. I wasn't angry yet. I was precise. The first thing I did was stop looking at the polished consumer interface. Those screens are designed to comfort, to simplify, to hide complexity behind rounded corners and soft fonts. I needed the raw data. Within minutes, I was inside the transaction metadata, timestamps, routing paths, intermediary nodes. To most people, it would have looked like meaningless strings of numbers and code. To me, it was a map. The money hadn't moved directly into Caleb's personal account. That would have been reckless. He knew just enough about my profession to avoid the obvious mistake. Instead, the funds had been fragmented and redirected through a sequence of digital intermediaries, each labeled as a routine commercial transaction. Almost convincing. Almost. I traced the terminal account and froze. Ashcroft Meridian LLC. The name wasn't new to me. I ran it through an internal database I had access to through work. The results surfaced instantly, highlighted in red. Flagged entity. Suspected laundering structure. International gambling syndicate. My stomach tightened. This wasn't misuse. This wasn't borrowing. This wasn't even impulsive theft. This was federal exposure. Caleb hadn't just crossed a moral line. He had stepped into criminal territory that didn't care about intent, excuses, or family relationships. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Financial facilitation. Each carried consequences that couldn't be softened by apologies. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating a kitchen that suddenly felt too quiet. He probably thought he was clever, routing the money through a business entity, believing that complexity equaled safety. What he didn't understand was that complexity leaves fingerprints. And he had just handed me everything I needed. I kept going. Money tells you what someone did. Location tells you why. Caleb's device was still linked to a shared cloud account from years ago, a remnant from when I had purchased his first smartphone to help him get established. He never removed himself. I opened the location history. Yesterday afternoon, precisely during the time he claimed to be attending a medical appointment on behalf of the older relative, his phone had been stationary. Not near a clinic. Not near any medical facility. It had been parked beside Borderline 7, a casino just outside state jurisdiction, notorious for minimal oversight. 4 hours. One location. Long enough to lose everything he already had. Long enough to decide I was the solution to his problem. The realization settled over me with unsettling clarity. This wasn't panic. It was entitlement under pressure. A soft shuffle interrupted my focus. I turned. Mara stood in the doorway, barefoot, holding the worn fabric rabbit she'd slept with since early childhood. Her oversized pajamas dragged slightly at the hem. She wasn't groggy. She was alert in a way children shouldn't have to be. "Did he take it?" she asked quietly. I didn't ask how she knew. Children always know when something essential has been disturbed. I could have lied. I could have wrapped the truth in comfort and delay. But lies were how we got here. "Yes," I said. "It's gone." She absorbed the words without sound. No tears. No disbelief. Just a slow nod, as if confirming something she had already suspected. "Then we stop him," she said. Not a plea. A conclusion. I looked at her and felt something shift. We weren't powerless anymore. We were informed. And information changes the balance. I didn't rush. People make mistakes when they rush, especially when emotions try to take the wheel. I had spent my career watching smart people ruin airtight cases because they wanted relief instead of resolution. What I needed now wasn't confrontation. It was intent. In financial cases, intent is the spine of everything. The difference between "I thought I was allowed" and "I knowingly committed fraud" is often one careless message, one unguarded admission typed without fear of consequences. And Caleb had never been careful. Years earlier, when I helped him upgrade his phone plan, temporarily, I had added him to a shared cloud environment. It was meant to simplify billing, nothing more. At some point, he forgot it existed. I hadn't. I logged into the archive. His primary message thread was gone, deleted recently. That alone told me enough. Innocent people don't erase conversations immediately after moving 6 figures. But deletion isn't destruction. I opened the recovery folder and restored the thread. The timestamps appeared instantly. 2 hours after the transfer. Caleb, it went through. Caleb, all of it. Lena, seriously? Caleb, every cent. 185. Lena, so we're actually doing this? Caleb, already booked. First class. No more scraping. Lena, you sure this won't blow back on you? Caleb, she owes me. Always has. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. That last line settled something inside me. This wasn't framed as borrowing. This wasn't framed as emergency. This wasn't framed as survival. It was framed as compensation. In his mind, my existence had created a debt I could never repay, except financially. I took screenshots. Saved originals. Logged hash values. Every step documented. Then I cross-referenced the message timestamps with his location data. The alignment was flawless. The message about waiting rooms had been sent from the casino floor. The request for fuel reimbursement coincided with a cash withdrawal at a gaming terminal. His story wasn't just false. It was constructed. I created a new folder on my desktop. Case material, personal. Inside it, I placed everything. Bank metadata. Entity flag reports. Message logs. Location overlays. I wasn't building a narrative. I was building a file. A soft sound pulled my attention away again. Mara was standing behind me, tablet pressed to her chest like armor. The glow from the screen reflected in her eyes, sharp and observant. Is it really gone? She asked. Yes. She stepped closer, scanning the open windows on my laptop. Lines of data, maps, highlighted entries. She had grown up watching me work late nights. She knew what this meant. That was the operation money, she said quietly. I nodded. She didn't cry. Instead, she asked something that surprised me. Did he plan it? Yes, I said honestly. For a while. She looked at the screen again, then back at me. Then he thought you wouldn't do anything. That was the part that hurt the most. Caleb hadn't underestimated my intelligence. He had underestimated my willingness to stop absorbing damage. I can help, she said. I almost refused automatically. Reflex. Protection. But then she unlocked her tablet and turned it toward me. A note app opened. Inside were passwords. Variations. Old patterns. He uses the same 3, she said. Just swaps numbers. I exhaled slowly. Thank you, I said. But I've got this part. She nodded, satisfied, not dismissed. That mattered. I turned back to my laptop and opened my secure professional portal. Local authorities wouldn't be fast enough. Banks would stall. Paperwork would sit in queues while the funds disappeared offshore. But there was another route. In my line of work, there's a direct reporting channel to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's designed for high-risk anomalies, transfers tied to flagged entities, international laundering structures, or criminal financing indicators. Most reports sit. Some don't. I entered the transaction ID. Tagged the recipient entity. Marked the urgency level. Then I submitted it. There was no dramatic sound. No confirmation animation. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Less than 7 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Not a call. A system notification. Transfer status, suspended. Associated accounts, restricted. The net hadn't just closed around the money. It had closed around him. I leaned back and closed my eyes for the first time since this began. Behind me, Mara exhaled. Is it stopped? She asked. Yes, I said. For now. She nodded once. Good. My phone rang. Caleb's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. I didn't speak first. Silence is unsettling to people who rely on control. Caleb had always filled space with noise, complaints, justifications, pressure. When I stayed quiet, I could hear his breathing change on the other end of the line. What did you do? He finally snapped. His voice was tight, strained, stripped of its usual arrogance. I pictured him standing somewhere fluorescent lit, phone clenched too hard, already sweating. I don't know what you mean, I said evenly. Don't do that. His tone sharpened. I'm at an ATM. My card got eaten. The app says my accounts are frozen. Federal freeze. He lowered his voice. You called someone. I let a pause stretch between us, just long enough to let panic bloom. I woke up and the money was gone, I said, injecting just enough tremor to sound believable. I thought I was hacked. I panicked. I logged in and everything locked up. I'm scared, Caleb. You're lying, he hissed. You knew exactly what you were doing. I don't even know who to call, I said softly. That money was for Mara. If it's gone, I can't fix this alone. The line went quiet again. I could hear him thinking. Calculating. He was trapped between two fears, the institutions now watching his money, and the people he owed on the other side of that transfer. And right now, he needed me to be what I'd always been. Compliant. Listen to me, he said, voice low and urgent. You need to call the bank. Tell them the transfer was authorized. That it was a mistake to flag it. Do it now. I don't know what to say, I replied. They're asking questions I don't understand. They want paperwork. They want you. Another pause. I'll come over, he said abruptly. We'll straighten it out together. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with certainty. Please, I said. I need your help. I'm on my way, he replied. And if you're playing games with me, he stopped himself, then added quietly, don't. The call ended. I set the phone down and looked at Mara. She was sitting at the table, legs tucked under her, watching me with unsettling calm. Is he coming? She asked. Yes. She nodded once. No relief. No excitement. Just focus. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. Then I turned off the porch light. Not to hide, but to let him believe I was. Behind the scenes, the report I had filed was already propagating through the system. The freeze wasn't passive. It was a signal. Accounts tied to flagged entities don't just lock, they attract attention. Caleb wasn't driving toward a family conversation. He was driving into a monitored environment. Headlights swept across the front window 20 minutes later. Gravel crunched. A door slammed. The pounding started almost immediately. Open up, he shouted. I know you're in there. I stayed still. Let him exhaust himself. Again and again his fist hit the door, each impact louder than the last. I could hear movement outside, another voice. Nervous. Higher pitched. Lena. I opened the door. Caleb stood on the porch, flushed and wild-eyed. Lena hovered behind him, arms wrapped around herself, fear replacing confidence. What the hell is wrong with you? Caleb stormed inside, brushing past me. Freezing my money? You think this is funny? I didn't freeze anything, I said calmly. He spun around, jabbing a finger toward my chest. The ATM says federal. You don't get federal freezes without calling someone. I picked up the folder from the entry table and handed it to him. I didn't call anyone, I said. They did. He stared at the cover page. The seal was unmistakable. His mouth opened, then closed. When you moved $185,000 into a flagged shell entity, I continued, voice steady, professional, you triggered an automated federal review. That transfer was marked the moment it cleared. Lena whispered, what does that mean? It means, I said, the money wasn't just frozen. It was tagged as evidence. Caleb stepped back. You set me up, he said hoarsely. No, I replied. You exposed yourself. He started talking fast then, explaining, reframing, insisting it was for family, for responsibilities he carried alone. The same speech he'd used for years. I waited until he ran out of air. You stole from a child, I said. And you documented it. The sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights spilled across the walls. Lena gasped. Caleb turned toward the window, then back to me. His confidence collapsed in real time. Please, he said. Fix this. I can't, I replied. You're not authorized. The knock this time was controlled. Professional. Federal agents, a voice called. Open the door. I stepped aside. They entered quickly. Efficiently. Hands visible. Questions brief. Caleb didn't resist when they cuffed him. He just stared at me as they led him out, disbelief etched into every line of his face. Mara stood in the hallway, watching. When the door closed and the lights disappeared, the house felt quieter than it ever had. Is it over? She asked. For him, I said. Yes. She nodded, then leaned against me. Outside, the engines faded. Inside, for the first time in years, there was no tension left to manage. The days after Caleb's arrest passed with a strange, fragile stillness. Not relief. Not celebration. Stillness, the kind that settles only after a storm has torn everything loose. The house felt larger without his presence, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. No buzzing phone calls. No sudden demands. No guilt disguised as obligation. Just quiet mornings, measured breaths, and the slow return of focus. Mara noticed it first. She slept through the night. No nightmares. No restless shifting. No whispered questions in the dark about what would happen next. For years, her body had carried tension it didn't have language for. Now it began, cautiously, to let go. On the third day, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Ms. Hale, a calm male voice said. This is Special Agent Rowan with Treasury Investigations. I'm calling regarding the flag transfer and your submitted report. Yes, I replied. I was expecting your call. We recovered the full amount, he said. The funds were intercepted before they reached international clearance. They'll be returned to your account pending final confirmation. I closed my eyes. And my brother? I asked. There was a brief pause, not hesitation, but professionalism. Mr. Hale is being charged with federal wire fraud, conspiracy to launder funds, and false representation. Given the digital evidence, this will not be a short process. How long? I asked. Likely over a decade, he said. Possibly more. I thanked him and ended the call. When I told Mara, she didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just asked, so I can still get the surgery? Yes, I said. You can. That night, we sat on the couch together, her head against my shoulder, watching a documentary neither of us followed. The future no longer felt like something we had to beg for. It felt earned. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. I knew who it was from before I opened it. You didn't have to do this. You humiliated him. You broke this family. I folded the letter neatly and dropped it into the shredder without responding. Because families that survive on silence and sacrifice aren't broken by truth. They're exposed by it. The surgery happened on a Wednesday morning. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and hope. Mara squeezed my hand as they wheeled her away, eyes bright with nerves and courage. I didn't cry until the doors closed behind her. 4 hours later, the surgeon came out smiling. She's going to walk without pain, he said. Eventually, she'll run. I sat down hard, overwhelmed not by joy, but by vindication. Every skipped comfort. Every apology I never owed. Every night I worked late while others spent freely. It hadn't been wasted. Recovery was slow, but steady. Mara learned to trust her body again. Each small milestone, standing unaided, walking across the room, laughing without fear, felt like a quiet rebellion against the past. One evening, months later, she looked up at me and asked, "Do you ever miss him?" I thought carefully before answering. "I miss the person I thought he was," I said. "Not the person he chose to be." She nodded, satisfied. At sentencing, I did not attend. I submitted a statement instead, factual, unemotional, exact. Numbers. Timelines. Evidence. Justice doesn't need spectacle. It needs clarity. When the final judgment came down, the number surprised even the prosecutors. 15 years. No early release. No plea reduction. The system does not look kindly on those who exploit trust and hide behind family ties. Life settled into something softer after that. I changed jobs, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. We moved into a smaller home closer to the park Mara loved. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't ask with care. And slowly, the identity I'd worn for decades, the fixer, the payer, the silent one, fell away. One night, while helping Mara with homework, she looked at me and said, "You're not quiet anymore." I smiled. "No," I said. "I just don't waste my voice." Spring came quietly. Not with celebration, not with announcements, just light through the windows earlier than before, and the sound of shoes by the door that no longer felt like footsteps of danger. Mara learned how to run in April. Not fast. Not gracefully. But freely. She ran across the grass at the small park near our new house, laughing when she tripped, getting up without fear, without pain. I watched from a bench, coffee cooling in my hands, heart steady in a way it had never been. That was when it finally hit me. We were safe. Not just legally. Not just financially. Emotionally. The kind of safety that doesn't require constant vigilance. The kind that doesn't demand payment to exist. A month later, the funds were officially released. Every dollar returned. Interest included. The agent called it procedural closure. I called it justice. I didn't celebrate by traveling or buying something extravagant. Instead, I paid off our home. Set up long-term care for Mara. Opened a modest education fund. The rest stayed untouched, not because I was afraid to use it, but because I no longer needed to prove anything with it. Money had stopped being a weapon. It was just a tool again. The final letter arrived in early summer. Official. Sealed. Sentence confirmed. Appeals denied. Case closed. I read it once and filed it away, not in a drawer, but in a box marked done. That night, Mara and I sat on the porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon. "Do you think he's angry?" she asked suddenly. "Probably," I said. "Do you feel bad?" I thought about it carefully. Not the way people expect, quick denial or forced forgiveness, but real consideration. "No," I said honestly. "I feel finished." She nodded, swinging her legs. "I think that's better than forgiveness," she said. It was. The people who disappeared from our lives after the arrest never asked how Mara was doing. Never asked if the surgery helped. Never apologized. Their silence was an answer. And I finally accepted it as one. I changed my number. Closed old accounts. Let friendships that only existed out of convenience fade. I didn't make announcements. I didn't defend myself. I simply stopped being available to people who only showed up to take. At work, I was offered a leadership role. I hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, but because for the first time, I was choosing, not reacting. I accepted. Teaching others how to see patterns, how to protect themselves, how to recognize exploitation before it becomes identity, that felt like the right use of my experience. One afternoon, months later, a junior analyst asked me, "How do you know when someone crosses the line?" I answered without hesitation. "When they tell you that your suffering is the price of peace." That night, Mara taped something to the fridge. A drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands under a sun. One was taller. One had a line on her leg, crossed out. Underneath, in careful handwriting, she wrote, "We won." I stared at it longer than I expected to. Because we had. Not by destroying anyone. Not by becoming cruel. But by refusing to stay small so others could feel large. People still ask me sometimes if I regret involving the authorities. If I wish I had handled it privately. I answer the same way every time. Abuse thrives in private. Accountability needs light. Mara doesn't limp anymore. She dances now. Loud music. Messy hair. Unapologetic joy. And I no longer confuse love with obligation. Family is not who demands your silence. Family is who doesn't need it. The past no longer follows us. It doesn't have to. Because the account is closed. The debt is paid. And for the first time, the future belongs entirely to us. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.